Well, it's just gone 10 o'clock. I think we might be missing a couple of people, but we will get started with a view to finishing the meeting as soon as possible. So, welcome to the July meeting of Audit and Governance. Just before we start, I think the only thing to mention is that a number of the committee have circulated questions or asked questions before the meeting, and answers to those questions have been circulated to all committee members. If there are still questions outstanding, please feel free to ask them as part of the normal meeting. If there are any issues where you require any further answers or have extra questions to the responses that have been provided, please feel free to ask those as well. And going forwards, please continue to do the same. Submit questions once the agenda comes out so that they can be asked of officers before the meeting, with a view to sort of trying to keep the meeting time down as much as we possibly can. So, apologies to the meeting.
We have apologies for Councillor Kerr and Councillor Grimmerdale. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dom. Late items to be introduced by the Chair, there are none. Declarations of interest? No? Good. So, minutes of the meeting on the 16th of June. Anybody got any issues with those or anything they need to ask? Phil?
Just on 1021, the review effectiveness of internal audit. I think we were talking about, I think Richard did introduce something about an external review was going to happen at some stage. I think was it next year, Richard? And I wonder when that process might start and how the committee gets involved with it. That's all.
It will be 2022, yes, Chair. We normally take it through the CMAP board first of all, and the CMAP operational group will decide that. But we will bring the details to members of this committee as and when we're doing them, and then the results will come through to you as well.
I think the only other thing on there was, Richard, was the handbook to go on SharePoint, but I know there was a slight update to that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have actually gone live on SharePoint now, and the committee handbook is there. The only problem is a lot of the links have broken as it's been transferred across to SharePoint, so I've got to redo all those or to all the documents, etc. But the plan is that the Chair will then go through and have a look at the handbook on the SharePoint site and see if it meets the requirements of the committee or whether I've got too indulged in it or I've not put enough stuff in there. So once the Chair's been through it, then we will roll it out to all members. I'm also planning on putting the slides from last week's training on there and any other new documents that come through, but I'll notify members of the committee as and when I put them on SharePoint. But hopefully some of those can go on in the next day or so.
Brilliant, thank you, Richard. If there's no other matters on the minutes, can I get them moved, please? Thank you, Councillor Willoughby. Is that a second, Councillor Councillor Hussain? Thank you. So next item is outstanding resolutions. Richard, were you going to?
I'll lead on this, Chair, yes.
Thank you.
The item in Appendix 1 around the coroner's service, I understand that you have signed off the letter, Chair, so that bit's dealt with. And also the recommendations, we've had the evidence through from those, the 3 recommendations, and Audit are happy that they've been implemented, so we can close that down now. Then there's the self-assessment is still on there, and that's something we need to revisit again this year, but we'll give the committee a chance to get embedded, shall we say, and used to what they're doing before we do all that. And the next item that's still on there is on the statements of accounts. I don't know if there's anything that needs to be said on those. That was a 1920 account, so I think we've dealt with all of that, as we have with the Section 151 officers report on the internal audit and how it's best, the lessons learned from the council projects and that type of stuff. Again, the committee's terms of reference, we've set up a working group for that, which we'll get in place and hopefully be able to report to the November meeting on the terms of reference. But at the moment, with some of the members of that committee being unavailable, we'll set it up for sort of early September. Which then brings us on to the Appendix 2 of that. The handbook we've just dealt with. There's the usual matter in there about the committee being apolitical, but that's something we deal with every time. The effectiveness of internal audit, we dealt with that at the last meeting, so that can come off now. One of the things we're going to look at is about the committee understanding their roles and remit, and having a skills and knowledge thing, but we can roll that in with the working group that's doing the terms of reference. I think that's covered it all, Chair.
Certainly make for a shorter document at the next meeting, won't it? Thank you, Richard. Item 6 is the annual governance statement training. There was nothing attached to this because this is all on me. I attended some SIPFA training earlier this month, 2 weeks ago, and have some more SIPFA training next month because I'm just that lucky. There are some slides from the training to be circulated, but I thought it would be helpful to go through some of the suggestions and some of the things that I'd picked out from that training before circulating just random slides to you without the context. So forgive me reading my notes. But some of the highlights looking at the annual governance statement were that we need to have a local code of governance. That local code needs to exist to set out how things should work, and then the annual governance statement should set out how things did work. We don't have a local code of governance, or we don't have a current local code of governance, so that needs to be addressed. This committee needs to review the draft statement, comment and make suggestions, and then this committee should monitor the implementation of the annual governance statement action plan. There were some suggestions that for sort of best practice, that the annual governance statement should have a forward by the chief exec or the leader of the council, that it should have user-friendly language, it should be short and focused and honest, it should have clear actions that the committee can monitor and should be accessible, it should reference the local code of governance, hence us needing to have one. It should highlight improvements to our governance, demonstrate how effective our governance is, and also be honest about gaps and weaknesses. Some of the best annual governance statements showcased had a good mix of text and diagrams. You'll see that from the slides. The thought is that that will make the statement easier to digest and consequently hopefully be read by more people, read and understood by more people. That this year the annual governance statement should feature the impact of COVID and the impact on our key sources of assurance. We also need to be aware of future risks and developments. The audit committee needs to consider whether we feel well cited on significant governance issues. We should be receiving quarterly or 6-monthly updates on the progress of the annual governance statement action plan. And as I say, the slides will be circulated, and I think probably prudent to have a chat with you, Simon, to discuss anything. But any questions once those slides are circulated, I'll be more than happy to have a chat about them. Councillor Willoughby.
This is one I couldn't do beforehand, sorry, Chair. Have they given, because you said we were talking outside of this about some of the sort of differences, is there any sort of good practice or best practice examples they've done that would help maybe like Simon and others put it together?
Yeah, thank you. There were, I think, half a dozen sort of best practice examples circulated, so there are links within the slides to those. And interestingly, when I caught up with Richard after the training, he suggested one council that might have been on there, which was, I think, the first one that we looked at. So, yeah, definitely things that can be looked at and good ideas for, not for pinching, but, best practice sharing. Item 7 is... Oh, sorry,
Just a quick query. I wondered if, did Simon get anywhere with his discussions with the letter to the PSA and NAO? I suspect not, but, you know.
As we discussed last committee, that we are in discussions with PSSA, both ourselves and Ernst & Young, over, if you want to call it, the local government market, the fee schedule levels and everything else. This is a national issue, as I think I described last time, that is not bespoke to Derby. And there has been a recent consultation on future, I think post-2023 from memory, sort of arrangements for audits. So it's ongoing, but I don't expect a Derby-specific resolution, to be honest, Philip.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I agree, but it's still down there as an outstanding item. That's all I was thinking about. If you've done it, I mean, we need to keep on top of it quite clearly, but no, I'm sure you are. But thank you.
So item 7, external audit plan. Helen, is this you?
Just a brief intro from me, then I'm going to ask Rochelle to present the plan, Chair, if that's okay. Committee members will remember from last meeting that the audit for 2021 is actually already in progress. It's just timing of committees that mean that we're presenting the plan to you today. The plan follows some very similar format to what those of you who've been on the committee before will be used to. And so we're going to obviously take the report as read, given that questions have already been submitted, but Vishal's just going to point out the most important points for the committee to be aware of.
Thank you, Helen. So I'm just going to go through the report. It is 43 pages covering 9 different sections, so rather than going page by page, I thought I'll just go and highlight the key areas and what's changed from the prior year. So if we go to the section 1, which summarizes all the audit risks, materiality, and the overview of our strategy, which is page 5 and 6. So if I'll start with page 5. So on there, we first summarize the audit risks that we've identified for the audit. The top 2 are standard risks that are on all audit files, and any other audit firm will also have on their clients as well. They are required by auditing standards under the ISO 240. So the one which relates to misstatements due to fraud and error, that's around management override, and we carry out standard procedures over that in line with prior years. The one around revenue recognition, this year we've had a slight change in focus. So this is where we look at the revenue streams and expenditure and identify where there's potential areas of risk to recognition of income and expenditure. So the ones we've focused on are the year-end positions, which is the same as last year, incorrectly capitalizing revenue expenditure, and the slight change in focus this year is around the grants received for COVID-19. Clearly the council have received millions. There's some to support obviously the council and others businesses which the grants have passed through the council's book. So it is looking at the COVID-19 grants which have been received and to ensure they've been accounted for correctly in the accounts. There's further details of that and the procedures we'll carry out on page 10. Then move on to the valuation of land and buildings. Again, this is a risk we've previously had on our audit plan. There's a slight change in focus this year. Our focus is more around the assets which are valued at fair value. These are assets where there's market evidence of the value, and those which are impacted by income, for example, car parks. We've also changed the risk from a significant risk to a higher inherent risk, which is effectively saying there's a risk of misstatement in this area, but it's no longer significant because of the improvements the council has made over the previous years. Move on to page 6, which is the PFI. The next risk is the PFI financing. Again, this is an area which is complex, which has lots of complex...
Sorry, we've just had an update on the laptop. It's about to shut down because it has an urgent update that can't be postponed. So if it's okay with the chair, we're just going to adjourn the meeting and then get a new one set up. Sorry about that.
Sharp pause.